Welcome back to my channel. You know, I haven't done a tips video in a long time, and I thought I'd catch up on some of the things that I use pretty regularly. So, before I get started, if you're from the United Kingdom, specifically from England, stick around to the end because I've got a question to ask of you. But right now, let's jump into these tips. My table saw is more than 20 years old, and it works great, except whenever I want to raise and lower the blade, it is hard to do, and it's almost impossible to turn it from side to side. So I did a lot of investigating, and one of the things that was reoccurring, some people said, never use WD-40, it'll gum up your machine. Other people said WD-40 works great. So I decided to try it. And 4 months ago, I cleaned out the inside of my machine, vacuumed it out. Now, of course, you always want to be unplugged whenever you're doing this. Cleaned it out, and I sprayed the moving parts with WD-40. I can show you 4 months later, this machine is still working better than it did when it was new. Some people say it'll only last for 2 or 3 months. I'm golden with that. If I have to go in there every 3 or 4 months, 2 or 3 times a year and clean up my machine and respray it with WD-40, if that's the kind of success I get, I'm very happy with that. The blade flips side to side easily. It moves up and down. It's a joy to work with now. So that might solve your table saw problems too. Here's a tip sent to me by Jeff, and I love this idea. Sometimes I'm looking to put a sort of a semicircle on the end of a board for a whole bunch of different reasons. And typically what I'm doing, I'm running around the workshop and I'm looking for, that one's too small, and put that one on, no, that one's too big, I want something in the middle. So I'm trying to find something that I can do it with, but here's a real quick way of solving that. You can use any of your steel squares that have markings on both sides. In this case, I'm going to use the 2 and the 2 right there, and I line those up like that. There's the 2 on that side, and now that point right there, where my pencil is, I'll put a little dot in there. That is now my center point. So all I need to do now is set my compass, whatever kind of a compass you have, set it like that. And now that will give you, a little too long here, that'll give you a perfect arc in there. Absolutely simple, easy like that. Now if you want a smaller one, you could use the inside markings. There's one there and one there. So you can see that that's a perfect square in there. So you could do the same thing and do a much smaller one. Really quick tip for doing circles. Here's a little tip. This is something I use all the time, especially whenever I'm making tables or chairs, anything with 4 legs, or pieces with 4 parts that I want to realign. So the first thing I do is set out the legs how I want them and put the face sides up or down wherever you want them. But then when I take them apart and sand them or start putting joinery in them, I want to make sure the legs are the same when I put them together. So what I do is just simply mark them like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, no matter what I do, when I take these apart and sand them, do whatever I need to do with them, to put them together, to do the joinery or whatever else I'm having to do with them, I can always put them back together exactly the same way. And when I'm finished marking them, the first thing I do is put some paraffin wax on them, because if I'm staining or dyeing them, I don't want those numbers to be obliterated. So I just use that, and now those numbers will stay on there forever. Here's a little tip that I've been using for years and years, and what you're looking at here is what we call arborite or plastic laminate. This is typically used for kitchen countertops. Very popular, it's waterproof, tons of different colors, and you probably have a local countertop shop that makes these, and they will be probably more than willing to give away offcuts to you. I get them every 2 or 3 years. That's about how long they last me. They give me a bundle of them. I always offer to pay for them. They never take money. They're just happy to get rid of this stuff. Now, I use it for many things. I use it for shims. I use it for mixing two-sided or double double part epoxy on there because it's nice and clean and dry all the time. Easy to cut. Honestly, you can cut it with your table saw, you can cut it with a bandsaw. I prefer to use snips. It cuts really easy with snips, and you can use a knife, and I use a knife very often. One of these little pull knives. It's got a little bit of carbide on the end. Draw a knife like that, and a couple of pulls, and it breaks like glass when you do that. Nice straight cut. If you want to make sure that it's straight, of course you can rub that on some flat sandpaper to get that nice and flat. And maybe you want to use that for spreading paint. Or not paint, but glue, spreading glue. Lots of different things you can do with it. And you can, if you're doing templating or something, you can actually even cut this. I don't know how it'll work for me, but you can actually make different lines, irregular lines like that. And again, it breaks like glass. I don't know if I'm talented enough to do that. I've seen guys do it, but yep, there it goes. And that's what you can do with it. So lots of things you can do with it. And this is a product that is a discarded product that you can reuse and get lots of use out of different things. One of the problems I encounter when I'm doing glue ups is sometimes after I've glued the two sides and put them together and clamped them, and when I take the glue off later on when it's semi-dry, I find that somewhere in the middle, once in a while, there's a little gap in there, like something has got in there. And of course, there's nothing you can do with that. You need to take and re-rip those boards, rejoint them, re-glue them back together. It's just a lot of work. So several months ago, I took one of these apart to find out what was going on in there. And what I discovered was when I'm using these little silicone brushes for putting on glue, and the reason, of course, we use these is because when the dry glue is on here, it doesn't stick to the silicone. You can pull it off, but what happens is towards the end, it's not loaded with glue. It's usually just a little bit of glue on there. And of course it gets inside. And what I've been having to do is go in and clean out even between these little teeth in here, these bristles, and clean out the glue in there. And it takes a long time, because when I took this apart, one of the little telltale signs that I found was you can see right between these little teeth, you could see the little semi-round in there, and I hadn't seen it because it got wound up with the glue when I was gluing it. So now what I'm doing all the time, I keep this near my workbench, and when I'm finished gluing, I just drop this in here. I let it sit for whenever I get back to it, and this has actually sat overnight, and look there's literally no glue in there, but I would still take this and wash that out. Only takes a minute or two, and now I don't have to spend all my time going through very methodically trying to clean out the glue that gets caught between those bristles. Well, that concludes my video for today, and time for me to go and clean off my glue brush now. It's so much easier now. But if you're from England and you've hung around long enough, what I wanted to talk about, I'm thinking about coming over to your tool and woodworking show on November 14, 15 of this year, 2025. And I would love to be able to connect up with woodworking clubs or woodworking guilds, and I'm only going to be in England for maybe a week or 10 days, not a long time, so I don't have a long window. But if you know of any groups that are sort of in that corridor, I'll call it the M1 corridor from like Crawley, sort of straight up through Leeds up to Harrogate. If you're part of a woodworking guild or club sort of in that sort of general vicinity, I'd love to hear from you. And maybe if you're having a meeting or something at the time I'm there, I could come in and pay a visit. So do not leave an email in a comment section ever of my video or anybody else's. Get in touch with me directly by email. There's an email here on YouTube. You can use Woodwork Web. Contact me that way. Lots of ways you can get hold of me. So I'm Colin Kinnett for Woodwork Web and looking forward to hearing from some of you.